can't even imagine as a parent hearing me speak now why I would ever want my kids to go anywhere near the game. And I don't want my son to go anywhere near cricket.
When I first heard Azeem Rafiq's testimony to MPs about the discrimination he experienced at Yorkshire County Cricket Club, I felt deep sadness and a fair amount of shock.
There was comments such as, "You lot sit over there near the toilets," elephant washers, the word "packy" was used constantly, and there just seems to be an acceptance in the institution from the leaders, and no one ever stamped it out.
This kind of racism, some of it overt, but mostly subtle, will be no surprise to anyone from an ethnic minority. We experience it in ways white British people may find hard to understand. And Azeem's story is particularly close to home for me. I was born in Pakistan but raised in Rotherham in South Yorkshire. And although I'm a doctor by training and now an editor at the British Medical Journal, my first love was cricket. For me, Azeem Rafiq's charges of institutional racism were a call to action. And in this programme, I'm going back to Yorkshire to try to better understand the historical roots of the club's apparently racist culture.
To this day, I'll tell you...
You don't know how you caught it.
Exactly. Everybody was jumping. What a catch.
I've come to the home of an old cricket teammate in Rotherham, Abdul Qadoos, to meet him and his son, Ibrar. Ibrar is now 35, but in his youth, he was a gifted young player who played alongside the future England leg spinner Adil Rashid. And Abdul is proud of his son's talent.
Ibrar started to play for Yorkshire under 12s. In that point, experience was okay. Under 14s, performed second highest wicket taker behind Adil Rashid, same age group. And he got recommended for North of England squad.
Yet, despite being the second highest wicket taker behind Adil Rashid and taking 4 wickets in 4 overs at the under-15 trials for Yorkshire, the club didn't pick Ibrar for the A-team.
To this day, it still bothers me. How can a player get selected to represent North of England, not get selected to play for the county?
How is it possible? You're put forward for the North of England squad, drawn from Lancashire, Yorkshire, Durham, Lancashire and Yorkshire in particular, the strongest youth counties. Yet you then end up in the Yorkshire age group B team.
The way we brought up Islamically, whatever's written for us, we accept it and move on and get on with it. Yeah. Otherwise, I think you drive yourself potty. But I've gone with it. It is what it is. It happened. I think it stirs emotions. Now, like you can tell, I forgot about it for a long time. Yeah. I didn't really want to talk about it today, in all honesty, because you just don't want to go there.
Whatever the eventual abilities and, however far your talent might take you and your hard work might take you, the hardest thing is that sense that you haven't been given a fair opportunity.
I think my experience probably wasn't as bad as some people. But it's sad that it's gone on for such a long time. It's not just one isolated event. This is over like 20 years, 25 years.
It's difficult to hear Ibrar's words and the lingering sense of injustice about what could have been, because I also trialled for Yorkshire when I was an aspiring young player. Now, I'm not saying I could or should have been a professional. I just want there to be a level playing field for people like me and Ibrar. I went to a Yorkshire under-17 trial, and I remember actually Darren Gough was there. And I honestly played the best I've ever played in my life. I was amazing in that net. Yorkshire players that I knew came up and said to me, you batted amazingly. But I remember thinking, there's no coach that has watched me bat for a single second. And I've just batted the best I've ever batted in my life. And I'm at a trial. I felt as if I was being ignored. I wasn't properly looked at.
I understand you're doing your best, but maybe not good enough. You can accept that. Yeah. You can deal with that. That's not an issue.
Yeah.
But when you fail to recognise effort...
It's disheartening.
It's very disheartening. So you've got to pick yourself up and get on with it. But like you said, I think the feeling of being shunned or not looked at, I think you'd rather have it in your face and you can deal with it than I think something hidden like that. It's just
presumably there were lots of other Asian kids in a similar situation to you. Did you, as a group, feel like this? Did other people have a similar experience to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of kids. You'd be go around Bradford for a week, really, if you wanted to interview half the kids. I didn't get anywhere. I know one person, he should have made it, to be honest. He's a lot better than what they've got now. Mm. But because he stood up to them, he didn't take no abuse, didn't take the crap, stood up. They didn't like it.
When you say you stood up to them, what do you mean?
You've been through it, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you've been through school at this point, where racism happens, this one calls you a packet. If you let it go, if you ignore it, they'll keep saying it. When it gets to a casual kind of level, people start thinking it's okay to say. So the people who don't allow that to happen might be labelled as, oh, he's a bit aggressive.
Yeah.
Or
trouble.
Trouble, yeah. So it's a very unfair system.
You were very, very, very good cricketer in the league, and you had a really good talent. But unfortunately, how Yorkshire works, so they look after their own. The couple of players you see, they might not have been talented as much, but they worked extra hard on them to get to the level they are now.
To my mind, this is what institutional racism looks like. And it can be hard to spot when this kind of subtle discrimination, for example, being overlooked at a trial, is part of the furniture. Even when it's happening to you, it's often so normalised that it's only later you see it for what it is. Amadeep Panesar from the University of Leicester is researching the history and development of British Asian cricket, and he watched Azeem Rafiq's testimony with particular interest.
I got a text from my friend and he said, I can't believe what's going on. You've been telling us about this for years and now it's finally on TV. I have been interviewing grassroots cricketers that have been talking about these problems. A lot of what he's saying is happening, a lot of the abuse he's faced and a lot of the experiences he's spoken about. I know people that have told me that and they've experienced that. So I think it's really pointed out the deep problems in cricket. It's really pointed out this serious cultural problem, and I think for me personally, it's left me with an empty feeling towards the club.
Azeem Rafiq has blown the whistle on a long history of discrimination. According to an England and Wales Cricket Board report from 2016, 30% of recreational cricketers in the UK are of South Asian descent, yet that figure drops to just 4% at professional level. Yorkshire County Cricket Club has had only 4 non-white Yorkshire-born players in its almost 160-year history. That's despite the county being home to one of the UK's largest cricket-loving South Asian communities. From the grassroots up, British Asians have felt alienated and unwelcome. That extended to the experience of Asian fans at Headingley, where racism has been notorious, including Asian children being sprayed with alcohol and the club doing nothing about it. All of this speaks to a deep rot at the club.
I think it quickly became clear to a lot of migrants that there was this barrier that they were facing, and a lot of people I spoke to said when they were going to other clubs or trying to speak to league secretaries, trying to be part of the league, very much felt like an air of a closed club. It's a closed shop, you know, we've got our league and we like it how it is. We don't want anyone coming in. Even when they played at an all-white club, they would experience racism, but it would just be accepted as a norm. Because of the state of English cricket and because of this sort of division, South Asians have been forced to create their own leagues and create their own clubs rather than joining existing leagues or joining existing clubs.
When black and Asian cricketers do play in official league cricket, they run into problems. One of these is the drinking and pub culture that goes with cricket and can marginalise players from cultures that shun alcohol. The Basambati, like Azeem Rafiq, has put his head above the parapet to highlight the racism he says he endured when he was a promising Yorkshire Academy player.
It's no secret that clubs will not sign a Pakistani overseas player because they don't put money behind the bar. I think the Asian community and ethnic minorities have suffered enough in this game. And, you know, being of Pakistani heritage, this game, it runs through our blood.
The worst experience of racism that I had, I think it was the third year at school. I must have been, 14? I'd walk down the corridor and people would walk past me and call me a Paki on a daily basis. And the worst thing about it is, this came from people who I knew, who I thought were my friends and my teammates in my cricket team. And I never told my parents at home because, I don't know, it's very, very difficult. I just kept it inside of me. I still carried on playing cricket with those people. They have never apologised to me about it, never shown any remorse about it. It's as if to them it never happened. At some point, you need that apology. You need people to recognise it was unacceptable. The racism players experience can be very direct, and it often takes strong leadership to stand up to it, as cricket writer and former local club captain David Hobbs tells us.
I once took his side off when one of our fast bowlers was abused. It was called the P word with a C word afterwards. And we had a 1 hour standoff. I was told by the umpires, I'll have to report you to the league. I said, well, I'll appeal to the league. And they said, well, you lose to the league. I said, well, I'll appeal at county level. And they said, you lose at county level. I said, well, I'll appeal at national level. I said, I know eventually I will win. When this guy comes in and apologises, we'll go back on.
We're about to pull up at Herringthorpe Playing Fields, which is a municipal park where I played most of my cricket when I started out in Rotherham. And at the moment, it's got football posts and goal posts everywhere. And classically, in the summer, it has cricket pitches. And a lot of the football and rugby pitches go right over the cricket square. So you can imagine what the state of the cricket pitch was when we played on it. But this is where we as Asians played almost exclusively all of our cricket back in the 80s into the 90s. We got changed behind bushes. There were no dressing rooms here. People would come from a night shift on the taxi rank. We had one player who had a furniture shop, and every week he would turn up with a sofa or an armchair strapped to the top of his car. He loved batting, and generally as soon as he was out, he was off. He was off to take his sofa to his customer. But the fact that we could play cricket to try and excel at something that we cared passionately about meant everything to us. It was central to our existence. And then the aspirations that came with it were also part of the immigrant experience. How do you then progress from where you are in a society to succeeding, to excelling? And if you see your role models doing that on the cricket field, you want to emulate them. But the tragedy for us was there was no opportunity to progress, and we were denied those routes to the top. We did try and play in more established leagues, but it was very hard to break through to them, and hence we were ignored. We were cricketers of the shadows. These are the historic foundations on which Yorkshire County Cricket Club stands. To us, it felt a lot like segregation. For years, the Born in Yorkshire rule meant even the most gifted players from first-generation immigrant backgrounds couldn't play for the county. But throughout the 70s and 80s, there was a growing awareness that the policy was affecting performance on the pitch and the club's coffers. Every other county had recruited overseas stars, from Viv Richards at Somerset,
crowd rise to Viv Richards, this great West Indian player,
to Clive Lloyd at Lancashire.
And what a great 100 this is from Clive Lloyd. One of the finest innings ever seen on this ground.
And Imran Khan at Worcestershire and Sussex.
A glorious shot there from Imran Khan. Powered it away to bring the 200 up for his side.
Having a world-class overseas player on the books was seen by all other counties as a surefire way of making your side better. By 1992, Yorkshire hadn't won the county championship for 24 years. A competition they used to dominate. So club chairman, Sir Lawrence Byford, took what at the time was an entirely pragmatic decision to open the gates to overseas players.
Cricket is all about playing cricket, and it's also about marketing. And for us to get back the losses of membership convinced me that the time had come for us to move into the overseas professional market.
Yorkshire had originally wanted Australian fast bowler Craig McDermott, but when he became unavailable, they went for a player whose youth belied his status as a true cricketing superstar.
Just 19 years old and only 5 foot 6 inches tall, Sachin Tendulkar certainly looks a boy in a man's world. Forging hitherto unpursued links with the local Asian community could be one of the great bonuses of Tendulkar's recruitment.
Sachin's arrival led to a walkout from some disgruntled members, including the former BBC cricket commentator Don Mosey.
Fred Truman, Ray Illingworth and Clotey would have died, rather than allow an overseas player, rather than say that Yorkshire were in a position of having to bring in an overseas player.
But as wonderful as it was to see an Asian of Tendulkar's calibre play for Yorkshire, the exercise felt hollow. What really mattered to us was that a local black or Asian cricketer should play for Yorkshire. And that was still some way off. During the 1999 Cricket World Cup, former cricketer and now Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan stirred up a hornet's nest when he publicly accused Yorkshire cricket of failing its Asian population. Yorkshire is flooded with Asian people, he said. How come an Asian doesn't find a place? There's got to be an element of some prejudice. Yorkshire, stung into action, held an open trial attended by 96 young Asians. But none of them made it into the Yorkshire side. Then the same year came a report from the ECB, Clean Bowl Racism, Going Forward Together. It proposed encouraging ethnic minority clubs into the mainstream and widening scouting systems. But it was several years before Ismail Dawood became the first Yorkshire-born British Asian to play for the county. After all the criticism, the reports, the promises that things were going to change, there was a time in the early 2000s when it seemed things may have been turning for the better, with a number of Yorkshire Asian players coming through the ranks. Amardeep Panesar again.
I saw Azeem Rafiq, I saw Ajmal Shahzad, I saw Rashid, and I thought, wow, like, South Asians are not just making up the numbers, like, they're there, like, winning games.
But the relative success of Yorkshire-born Asian players was a false dawn.
10, 15 years on from that, it just seems like the club has gone backwards, or where's the South Asian talent?
Lifelong league cricketer and cricket writer, David Hobbs.
Obviously, there's something goes wrong around 16 or 17 years old at Yorkshire when you look at the under-11s, the under-13s, and you look at the composition of those sides, and there will be some young lads, often Pakistani Muslims because of the nature of Bradford in particular, along with the usual collection of privately educated white guys and everything. But something happens around 17 and they tend to disappear and fall off, and something is going wrong within Yorkshire cricket. Azeem Rafiq was strong enough and bloody-minded enough and talented enough to get through that system, albeit eventually that system damaged him.
You must have played with or come across players who were of Asian or black ethnicity who were particularly talented. What's stopping them getting the opportunity to progress within the county structure?
One of the answers to that, of course, is racism. For me, they are institutionally racist, but it's sins of omission. So we've always done it this way, and so we'll continue to do it this way. It's a complacency.
There are a number of factors holding black and Asian kids back in sport, says Alima Khan, the founder of Opening Boundaries, which works to raise the profile of women in sport, particularly cricket.
I've seen it with younger girls that I've coached as well that have tried to get into the Yorkshire women's setup at a young age, and they've come to me and they've said it's really hard. They don't understand my background. The kit is costing so much money, and I don't want to say that I can't afford it because all the other, girls are there and they've got their, fancy kits and their big bats. And I'm not saying that for everyone.
No.
But majority in certain sports is.
I don't think we've been heard. I think that's the real problem. They're not really engaging the community at that point.
Ibrar believes the biggest problem is the lack of accountability of coaches.
If you're going to justify a select, you can't just have it over a coffee and a cigarette kind of thing, and a basic spreadsheet that this guy's performed over this time. So why have you dropped him? What's he done? Has he took a stump to somebody's head? No. then what's got wrong here? So everyone's brushed under the carpet and expected to go away.
As you say, coach is very powerful. They're selecting the squad, they're choosing which players to bowl, where you bat in a match, who gets the opportunities. So as a coach, you can very much steer players' development.
It's limitless power over young children.
Yorkshire County Cricket Club has always denied charges of institutional racism. But while we were recording, news broke of the club getting rid of 16 members of staff, a root and branch cull that seems a clear admission that there is an endemic problem.
The County's Director of Cricket, Martin Moxon, and the head coach, Andrew Gale, are among 16 people leaving the club.
The club virtually at the moment has nobody to run it.
Do you think it was justified?
I think in the end they had no choice. If this is going to end with progressive change and a new era is going to begin, I think in the end a total clear out was the only way to have a chance of achieving that. Going back to Azeem, he's admitted an anti-Semitic tweet. He's not perfect, very few people are. I think it's a reminder that we have to educate everybody. Yorkshire has to educate everybody. Everybody at 12, 13, 14 will go into Yorkshire's system as a flawed human being. Many of the people educating them will also be flawed human beings. Those of us talking about it on this programme are flawed human beings. And until you accept that, and until you accept that a diversity policy is not enough, and this is about hearts and minds and a strong culture through your club, then you're not going to get very far.
Of course, this isn't just a story about cricket or Yorkshire. It's about the prejudices that still run deep in British society.
People have been allowed to carry these views forward in life, unchecked, and then pass these attitudes on. My son is 5. He came back and he said, told me, "Dad, what's a wog?" Someone's called me a wog, and I thought that's some classic racism from the 70s.
Oh, you called me
I mean, his granddad must have told him that. And so you think, trying to make sense.
You haven't got that from TV or something.
No, that's not TV. Yeah. That's come out of, you've been told. I was really, really surprised by that. The school chat said, it never happened.
As a society, we have some difficult conversations ahead, but they are crucial if we're to heal the fractures that divide us, says Halima Khan.
There comes a point where you finally realise what's actually happening, and you finally realise that there is an us and them culture. We're in the position that we are in now because people are still not willing to believe that. It's easier to turn a blind eye and say it's not happening than it is to say it's happening, because then you have to do something about it. There needs to be a whole education around cultural intelligence of the communities that surround Yorkshire, because Azeem can come in just as Michael Vaughan or Joe Root have come in from their cultural environment. But if the two don't marry up with each other, it's not to say that one is wrong and one is right. It's for them administrators and them coaching staff to understand what is Azeem's starting point coming into this club, and what is Michael Vaughan, for example, or Joe Root's starting point coming into this club. Only then can they then differentiate and make sure that there is equal access to opportunity, but also equity in what they're doing, so there is fairness. And it's not just treating everyone the same, but making sure that there's fair opportunity for everyone to thrive.
Are we risking demonising Yorkshire when it's a wider problem?
Yeah, we have to be careful with that. And Yorkshire absolutely need to put some wrongs right. But at the same time, they mustn't just be used as a scapegoat for the whole of sport or cricket in itself. There are plenty of counties out there, but there's probably challenges within all of them. I think what we have to do now, and I say we deliberately, because this is, this has happened to Yorkshire cricket, but the Yorkshire community have to get behind this now. There is a lot of work to be done at a grassroots level, working with communities and parents to build that trust up again in Yorkshire cricket. I truly believe that we're going in the right direction.
Respect, not racism.
The term is Pakistani.
Azeem Rafiq speaking out has prompted a national conversation about racism in cricket and society.
It is not and will never be banter.
Run Racism Out is the first British Pakistani-led anti-racism organisation launched as a direct result of the scandal at Yorkshire. Transparency and accountability are key to rebuilding trust. Admitting and acknowledging where mistakes were made and being clear about how to address them. But Yorkshire County Cricket Club and the England Wales Cricket Board declined to speak to us for this programme. The ECB did send us a statement.
We have already taken important steps to make the game more inclusive and are accelerating this in light of Azeem's case. This includes committing to a wide-ranging action plan to tackle racism and promote inclusion and diversity at all levels of the game.
And Yorkshire did point us in the direction of a press conference from their new chairman, Lord Patel of Bradford.
I've been appointed with a clear remit of righting the wrongs of the past and making sure that this club is an inclusive home for aspiring players in the future.
Culling staff in a bid to end a toxic culture is an extreme act. The club have also set up a whistleblower hotline to report instances of discrimination and harassment. As we record this, they tell us 62 people have contacted the hotline. But what people really want to see is no more racism directed towards them, equal opportunities to progress, and representation at every level. There is also the issue of the Yorkshire way. Has this become toxic and too entwined with keeping the white rose white? We need a new Yorkshire way that represents all communities. Only when that day arrives will Yorkshire have passed its protracted and damaging cricket test.
Maybe we were like, I suppose, the cannon fodder. Hopefully, I think that's the last of it. And that's what it needs to be. It needs a hard stop and say, right, look, that's the last of it. Yeah. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to be open. There's going to be dialogue. And there's going to be actual representation, meaningful. I mean, not just token coach in the corner. You can't have it anymore.
My grandfather was here in Newcastle. He came to Newcastle in maybe 20s, 30s. You know, my grandchildren are fifth generation here. And people still doesn't accept us as British.
If you go back to the ethos of Yorkshire, you know, it's God's own country, land of our own, you know. It's a proud place and the people are decent. And then the county cricket is a reflection of that. But they need to have a conversation and understand what the ethos of Yorkshire is. What are we in Yorkshire? Yeah. We're a community that's got a large Asian demographic. So you've got to move with the times. You've got to get everyone involved.